Today we'll be looking at why most popular retirement calculators are giving you misleading information about your readiness. Over our years helping clients plan for retirement, we've discovered that standard online calculators consistently overlook critical factors that can impact your retirement timeline. That's exactly why we're making this video today, to show you what they miss and what you actually need to make accurate projections. Let's get right into it.
Most people approaching retirement have probably done the same thing. They've used a free online retirement calculator, whether it's from some of the major financial institutions, brokerage firms, financial blogs. These tools promise a quick answer to the all-important question, am I on track for retirement? At first glance, these calculators might seem like a perfect solution. It's simple, it's accessible, it's based on numbers that you already have. They ask for your age, income, savings, expected retirement spending, then generate a colorful chart showing your financial future. But what if I told you these calculators are fundamentally flawed?
Yeah, John. Now, the problem with some of the standard retirement calculators is they've become the default starting point for millions of Canadians who are planning their retirement. They're easy to use, They look professional, and they give that sense of certainty. But there's a major issue, one that could mean the difference between working an extra 5 years or retiring on time. What's the problem? It's that the way that these calculators are built, they create a systematic miscalculation of your retirement readiness. They don't just make small errors. They consistently overestimate how much money you need, and that can lead to unnecessary extra years in the workforce.
So let's figure out what the real cost of these miscalculations are. What does it mean in real terms? The average miscalculation ranges from 15 to 40%, which translates to an extra 2 to 7 years of unnecessary work before retirement. So imagine this. You've worked hard for decades, you're financially prepared, but because of a faulty projection, you keep working until 70 when you could have retired at 65. That's up to 2,500 days of missed time with family, missed vacations, missed opportunities to enjoy retirement that you worked for. And in terms of dollars, this could mean saving an extra $250,000 to $500,000 you didn't actually need. So how do these errors happen? Let's break it down.
So as an office, we've analyzed hundreds of retirement projections, and we've identified 4 key flaws that appear consistently across all the standard retirement calculators. So, number 1, most calculators apply a fixed inflation rate, and it's usually around 3%, and that's to all expenses across the board. But the reality is that retirement spending changes over time. You've got housing and entertainment that often decrease, but healthcare rises. Studies show that real retiree spending grows at a lower rate than standard inflation, meaning these calculators overestimate how much you'll need. Flaw number 2, these tools often assume a static average return, ignoring how real portfolios can be up and down over time. So a market downturn in the first few years of retirement can have a large impact 1 year later on. Yet most calculators do that improperly and just show linear growth. Flaw number 3, most calculators assume you'll spend the same amount every year in retirement, and they only adjust for inflation. But research from Morningstar and other studies show that spending naturally declines in mid-retirement before rising again in later years. This means that most calculators significantly overstate lifetime expenses. And the last flaw, many retirement calculators either ignore taxes entirely or apply blanket tax rates that don't really reflect retirement withdrawals. Strategic tax planning like RRSP conversions and capital gains strategies can lower your tax burden significantly, but calculators fail to factor in these real-world tax efficiencies. Each of these flaws can add unnecessary working years to your retirement plan, and combined, they systematically delay retirement for millions of people.
Yeah, and if you're worried about your retirement number and want to know what it actually looks like, click the link in the description. We've put together another video walking through all the key factors that you need to consider to accurately time your retirement. But we'll head back to our discussion. So Carlo, just like you mentioned, when these 4 errors combine, the impact is greater than just adding them up. They interact in a way that magnifies the distortion, pushing retirement timelines out further than necessary. Think of it like this. If a ruler is off by just a few millimeters, every measurement taken with it will be slightly wrong. But if you use that ruler to build a house, those small errors compound into major misalignments. That's exactly what's happening with these standard retirement calculators. So let's walk through a real-world example of how these adjustments impact retirement timelines. So we have a sample client, Mark and Susan. They're a married couple. They're in their late 50s. Mark, let's say, is 57. Susan is 55. And they've both worked hard to build a solid retirement portfolio. They've saved $950,000 in their retirement accounts. They own a home with about $180,000 left on the mortgage and bring in a combined annual income of about $108,000 while diligently saving 20% of it each year. Like most people, they've started their retirement planning journey by using one of the standard online retirement calculators. The results? Pretty disappointing. The calculator told them that they need to work until ages 67 and 65 to retire comfortably. Worse, it estimated their portfolio would fall short by 28%, making them question if they could ever retire securely. But something didn't sit right. They weren't sure if the calculator was truly reflecting their situation. Were they really trapped in the workforce for another decade, or was there a better way to assess their readiness? Now that you've seen why standard retirement calculators might be unnecessarily delaying your retirement, let's look at how Mark and Susan discovered that they can retire 5 years earlier than the calculator suggested.
Okay, so Mark and Susan in this situation knew that they needed a more accurate way to assess their retirement readiness. That's when they applied a more precise methodology, one that accounts for factors standard calculators completely ignore. Number one, they need to adjust for category-specific inflation. So instead of assuming a blanket 3% across all expenses, they analyze their actual spending patterns. So commuting, mortgage payments, they're set to decrease, while healthcare and travel are expected to rise. By adjusting for category-specific inflation, they reduced their projected lifetime spending by 11%. And that immediately improved their outlook for retirement. Number two, you need to factor in sequence of return risk. So in their initial calculation, they assumed a fixed investment return every year, ignoring volatility. But by applying a sequence of returns risk model, they realized that their portfolio didn't need to be as large as they thought. This adjustment decreased their requirement portfolio size by 9%. Step three, you need to implement a dynamic spending curve. So standard calculators assumed Mark and Susan's spending would remain constant throughout retirement. But as we know, in reality, retirees tend to spend more in the early years, the go-go years, and less in mid-retirement before healthcare costs rise again later. Adjusting for this reduced the required savings by another 13%. Lastly, step four, you need to optimize your tax withdrawals. So one of the biggest oversights in standard calculators, it's tax optimization. So instead of withdrawing from their accounts in a traditional order, they implemented a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy. By balancing withdrawals from RSPs, TFSAs, and even non-registered accounts, they increased their portfolio longevity by 8%, and that allowed them to retire sooner. And finally, step five, refinancing their mortgage. Mark and Susan had about $180,000 left on their mortgage, and so they explored refinancing options. By consolidating their remaining mortgage into a low-interest rate HELOC, or home equity secured line of credit, they freed up additional cash flow, which gave them more flexibility in their early retirement years. What did all of this result to? Retirement at 62 and 60 instead of 65 and 67, saving 5 years.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway? Standard retirement calculators are not built for accuracy. They're built for simplicity. And in that simplicity, they systematically push people to work longer than necessary. The good news? With the right approach, you can calculate your retirement readiness more accurately and take control of your financial future. Now you know why generic retirement calculators are wrong and what you should be doing instead to prepare. But as you saw with our client, their readiness completely depended on their exact situation. That's why it's so important to know what your needs are and the strategies that'll help you get there. So if you want to understand how to better use these tactics you can use for your plan, click the first link in the description to watch another video where we break that down and more. We'll see you in the next one.